I'm just an extra in the family. That's what my stepmother said once in front of everyone. Like, I wasn't there. Like, I didn't exist. I was pouring juice into glasses at the dinner table. Her voice was sharp, casual, like she was talking about a stain on the carpet. She's just there, like a leftover from a life that's over. No one said anything. Not my father, who was reading emails, not my stepsister, who just smirked into her salmon, and definitely not me. I just stood there holding the bottle, pretending I didn't hear, pretending my hands weren't shaking. The thing is, I live in the basement, not because there's no room upstairs. We have 5 bedrooms. I live there because it's easier for everyone. It started as temporary, but 8 became 12 and 12 became 22. Years. I stopped counting. There's one small window. It faces the side fence. I taped a drawing there once, a beach blue water, a palm tree. I made it when I was 10. It's faded now, like me. Dinner is always quiet, polished forks, expensive plates, clinking sounds. I set the table serve clear. I sit last, eat least. Sometimes I eat later after they're done. They say I'm slow, that I suck the energy out of the room. Yesterday, my stepsister Rachel said, "Why are you still here? You're just a burden." She was laughing. Her mother laughed too. My father said nothing, just wiped his mouth and stood up. Went to his study like always. That night, I went downstairs and listened to my mom's voice. I keep her last voicemail on a little recorder. She left it the day before the accident. It's just her saying she loves me. Nothing special. But I play it when I feel like disappearing, when their silence is too loud. Sometimes I dream she's still alive, that I live upstairs, that someone notices when I cry. I clean, I fold, I disappear. And somehow I'm still here. I was 8 the first time I understood what being unwanted felt like. It was summer, hot, sticky air. My shirt clung to my back as I waited on the front porch, a small backpack at my feet. My mom had promised me ice cream after school. She never broke promises, but that day she didn't show up. An hour passed, then 2. A neighbor called my dad and he came eventually, face pale, eyes unreadable. He didn't kneel down, he didn't explain. He just said, "Come on," and opened the car door. I didn't know she was gone until the next morning. No one told me directly. I overheard it through a door. Car accident. Instant. Poor Lily. Poor Lily. That's how it started. 2 months later, she moved in my stepmother. Her name was Diane. She was beautiful like a magazine woman. Perfect hair, polished nails, that voice cool and composed. She brought her daughter Rachel, who was already taller than me and 2 years older. At first, I thought we'd be a family. I even drew a picture and stuck it to the fridge, all 4 of us holding hands. Diane tore it down without a word. That was the first time I heard her say it. "You're not part of this family." I cried in the laundry room that night. My father didn't ask why. He never did. Maybe he didn't want to know. It got worse when I started looking more like Mom. Same dark eyes, same smile, they said. Diane hated it. She stopped calling me by name. It was always her or that girl. Rachel followed her lead. One afternoon, while we were alone in the kitchen, she looked at me and said, "You should have died with her." Her voice was flat, like she meant it. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there swallowing hard like a glass shard stuck in my throat. I started shrinking myself, making no sound when I walked, not speaking unless spoken to. I learned how to fold towels the way Diane liked, how to clean the floor without leaving streaks. If I was perfect, maybe they'd tolerate me. Maybe? But even at 8, I knew this wasn't my home anymore. I used to wonder if my father saw it. The way Diane looked at me like I was an unwanted guest overstaying her welcome. The way Rachel snatched things from my hands or rolled her eyes like I was a stain on her world. I wondered if he noticed how quiet I'd become, how I'd stopped laughing, even at cartoons I used to love. But he never said anything. He was always elsewhere, buried in spreadsheets, glued to his laptop, murmuring about deadlines and meetings. Sometimes I imagined he was trapped too, that he didn't know how to fix it. But then he'd glance at me like I'd interrupted something sacred, and I'd remember, no, he just didn't want to deal with me. Our house was beautiful. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a fountain out front that sparkled under the sun. But inside, I was kept out of sight. I wasn't allowed in the living room when guests came. Diane said I made people uncomfortable. I didn't ask why. They told people I was staying with relatives when they went on vacation. I never saw the ocean or Disneyland. Just stayed home, feeding the dog, cleaning the fridge, listening to Diane's voice echo from upstairs like a storm I could never escape. Rachel got everything: clothes, piano lessons, parties. She had her mother's sharp tongue and her father's confidence. But what she wanted most was Diane's approval, and somehow hurting me earned her more of it. Once she broke my recorder, not all the way, just enough to loosen the back cover and scratch the speaker. When I confronted her, whispering, "Why did you do that?" she shrugged and said, "If I hear that tape one more time, I'll smash it and bury it with her." She meant it. I slept with the recorder under my pillow after that, like it could protect me, like her voice could still hold me together. My room, the basement, had no lock, but it was mine, the only place I could breathe. I covered the walls with drawings, taped memories over peeling paint as if I could create something softer than what I lived through. No one came down there unless they had to. I existed in silence. I didn't cause problems. I didn't raise my voice. And still every day I was reminded I didn't belong here. I did try to leave once. I was 15. I'd saved birthday money lunch, money coins I found between couch cushions. It wasn't much, maybe $70 total, but to me it felt like a fortune. Enough to start over somewhere. Somewhere with air that didn't choke me. I packed my bag one night, just a few clothes, a book, my drawings, and the recorder. I left a note not for my father, not for Diane, but for myself. "You matter. Keep walking." I made it to the bus station. Bought a ticket to nowhere, a small town a few hours away. But when the bus pulled up, I froze. I saw a mother holding her daughter's hand, brushing her bangs from her eyes. The girl laughed. It sounded like sunlight, and I remembered my promise. The day of the funeral, I stood by Mom's casket holding her cold hand. I told her I'd take care of things, that I'd be strong, that I wouldn't make Dad's life harder. It was a child's promise, but I believed it. So I stepped back from the bus, tore up the ticket, and walked home in the dark. Diane didn't even notice I was gone. Rachel asked if I was sneaking out to meet a boy and laughed. My father just looked at me and said, "Where were you?" like I'd been late for dinner. I went back to the basement, shut the door, curled up under the blanket, and cried until I couldn't breathe. That was the last time I tried to leave. Not because I gave up, but because something inside me changed. I realized silence wasn't just survival. It was strength. My silence was a shield not for them, but for me. If I let go of who I was, they'd win, and I wouldn't let that happen. I started journaling at night, scribbling thoughts I couldn't say aloud. I wrote letters to my mother, folded them neatly, and tucked them inside books. I drew faces I'd never seen, people with kind eyes, soft smiles, strangers who felt safer than anyone in the house above. I never fought back. Not with words, but I stayed. For me, staying was the fight. Some days hurt more than others. Not because anything new happened, but because nothing ever changed. The repetition was a kind of cruelty on its own. Wake up clean, keep quiet, serve dinner, disappear. I remember one winter morning when I just turned 16. I made pancakes because it was Sunday, and Mom used to do that. I thought maybe if I made them like she did, they'd smile, or at least say thank you. They didn't. Rachel took one bite and spat it into a napkin. "What is this? Are you trying to poison us?" she said, laughing like it was a joke. Diane didn't even look up from her coffee. My father said don't waste food as if it were my fault. I threw the rest out in the trash. That night, I didn't eat. There were no bruises, nothing you could take pictures of, but the cuts were there in words and looks and what they chose not to say. On holidays, they decorate the house, invite people over. I was told to stay downstairs. Diane once said, "No one wants to see your sad little face at Christmas." So I lit my own candle in the basement and listened to carols on the recorder. That recorder, it was my lifeline. Sometimes I'd press play just to hear her say it. "I love you, Lily, so, so much." Even if it hurt, even if it made the silence that followed harder to bear. It reminded me that someone had wanted me once, that I wasn't always invisible. Rachel would mock me when she caught me with it, still clinging to that ghost, she'd say. Maybe if you disappeared, she'd come back. I never answered. I just turned away. I found joy in little things, a paperback someone left on the bus that I secretly kept. A warm towel fresh from the dryer, the smell of rain through the basement window. I learned to survive off crumbs of comfort. And still I held on to my drawings, my notebooks, my mother's voice. Because when the world above tells you that you are nothing, you either start to believe them or you dig deeper and find the part of you that refuses. I chose the second. It was my 18th birthday when it all came crashing down. They forgot, of course. Or maybe they remembered and didn't care. Either way, no one said anything. No cake, no card, no smile. Just another cold breakfast and silence thick enough to chew. That night, Rachel had friends over, loud music, laughter. I stayed in the basement like always until someone spilled a drink and Diane yelled my name. I came upstairs, cleaned up the mess, avoided eye contact, but one of Rachel's friends, a boy I didn't know, looked at me and said, "Who's that?" "The maid." Rachel smirked. Something like that. She lives downstairs. "Don't talk to her. She's weird." Everyone laughed. I felt my face burn. My hands shook as I grabbed the towels. I wanted to vanish into the floor. But then Rachel said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seriously, I don't know why Dad keeps her around. She's not even really family." I dropped the towel. Diane didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That smirk on her lips was approval enough. I didn't speak. I just turned around and went back to the basement, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I curled up on my mattress and played the voicemail. Again. And again. And again. "I love you, Lily, so much." But that night, the tape warped. It had been played too many times. Her voice started to crackle. Then skip. Then fade. I sat there, frozen, staring at the recorder, whispering, No, please, like I could bring her back with enough begging. It still worked a little, but it wasn't the same. The warmth in her voice was drowned under static. My lifeline was slipping. Later, I found Rachel had gone into my room. She'd taken the notebook I kept under my mattress, the one with letters to Mom. Drawings, thoughts I never said out loud. She showed it to Diane. They laughed. My father walked past and didn't even look at me. I cried in the laundry room. Not loud, not messy, just quietly, like always. Something broke in me that day. Not in anger, in surrender. I realized I could stay forever and it would never change. That I could fold every towel perfectly, serve every meal with a smile, and I'd still be something like the maid. That was the first night I packed my bag again. I didn't leave right away. Not because I was afraid not this time, but because I needed to find something first. Something I hadn't touched in years. There was a shoebox hidden deep in the corner of the basement closet, under blankets behind old junk. I hadn't opened it since I was a kid. Inside were scraps of my mother, a crumpled birthday card. She wrote me a faded photo of us at the zoo and the little seashell necklace I made her in preschool. It still smelled faintly of her perfume. And taped to the inside of the lid was a note. Just one sentence written in her handwriting. "Even if the whole world turns away, I won't." I don't remember when she wrote it. Maybe it was for school. Maybe it was a lunchbox note she never packed. But reading it now, I felt like she was sitting beside me. I cried. I didn't try to stop it. I let the sobs shake my chest, my shoulders, my spine, because for the first time, I wasn't crying from pain. I was grieving. Not just for her, but for the version of me that waited, for the girl who thought love could be earned by disappearing. That night, Rachel came down looking for her charger. She saw the box open on my bed, saw the seashell necklace in my hand. She rolled her eyes. "God, are you still obsessing over her?" I didn't answer. She walked closer, picked up the recorder, the one that still crackled and skipped, and held it like it was nothing. "If I hear that tape one more time," she said, "I'll smash it and bury it with her." My fingers curled into fists, not to hit her, not even to stop her, but to keep myself grounded, to stop myself from screaming, because that moment could have destroyed me. Years ago it would have. But now I saw it for what it was, just another broken sentence from someone who never saw me whole. I waited until she left. Then I wrapped the recorder in my mother's scarf, folded the photo, slipped the seashell necklace into my pocket. I zipped up my bag and looked around the room one last time. It was never home, just a shell. But it was the place I learned how to endure. I left just before sunrise. No note, no goodbye, no slamming doors or dramatic speeches, just a quiet zip of my bag, soft footsteps on cold tile, and the gentle creak of the basement door closing behind me. The house was silent. Upstairs, the world was still asleep, wrapped in thick blankets and comfortable lies. I passed the front hallway where family photos hung. My face was in none of them, not even from before. I stepped outside, pulled my coat tighter, and felt the chill of the morning bite into my skin. It felt honest. I didn't have a plan, just a small suitcase, the recorder wrapped in my mother's scarf, a handful of bills I'd saved from tutoring kids online at night. But what I had for the first time was air in my lungs that didn't feel stolen. I walked to the bus stop at the edge of town, same one I'd stood at years before, only this time I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something. I didn't know what yet. I just knew it wasn't that. There was a quiet on that ride I'll never forget. Not the kind that smothers you like the basement, but a clean kind, a beginning kind. I watched the trees blur past the window. My reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, but something else too. Something alive. I found a small town by accident. It wasn't far, but far enough. I rented a room above a bakery from an older woman who didn't ask too many questions. I started working in the back, folding boxes, wiping counters, learning the names of regulars. For the first time, people saw me not as a burden, but as a person. There were nights I missed Mom so much it ached. Nights I played the recorder, even with the static, just to feel her near. But slowly I began recording other things too, my own voice. Little thoughts, notes to self, sounds that felt like healing. I made someone laugh today. I bought my first candle. I exist. That last one, I whispered it like a prayer. Because I did. Not for them, not for their approval, not for the promise of love that never came. I existed in spite of it all. It's been 4 years now. Sometimes I forget the sound of that house, the way Diane's heels clicked on the marble, the sharp edge in Rachel's voice, the hum of silence at the dinner table when I dared to speak. But then, a smell, a phrase, a flash of memory brings it all back like a wave crashing in the middle of a quiet day. I still have the recorder. The tape barely plays anymore, but I don't need it the way I used to. Her voice isn't just trapped in those wires, it's in me now. I carry it in the way I speak kindly to others. In the way I fold my laundry gently, in the way I remember to breathe before reacting. I work at a small bookstore now. I organize the shelves, run the register, talk to customers who look like they've lived quiet, heavy lives too. Sometimes they tell me things, small truths, griefs, joys, and I listen, because I know how much it matters to be heard. Last week I got a letter, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from Rachel. She said Dad had a stroke, that Diane had left, that the house was quiet now, too quiet. She wrote, "I found one of your drawings in the basement. It made me cry." I stared at that sentence for a long time. She didn't say sorry, but I don't think she knows how. That's okay. She asked if I'd ever come back to visit. I won't. Not out of anger, but because I've already said goodbye. Long before I walked out the door, I forgave them in pieces quietly on nights when I hugged my knees and whispered truths into the dark. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting myself move on. I think Mom would be proud. Sometimes I walk by the ocean, the real one, not a drawing taped to a basement window, but crashing waves, sharp wind sand in my shoes. I close my eyes and I hear her again, not on a tape, but in my blood, my breath, my becoming. I love you, Lily, so, so much. That voice is with me. Not in the past, but here, now, free.